So, unlike many, I've put a tremendous effort into the truth, the thought of what's really going on, laying myself out to not only discover this truth, but to work with it. And then to really, as a byproduct, the judgment over humanity was never my goal. It was just to live a life, to gain. Um, it, Let me back up here and say, with the limited um, and isolated, meager resources that were not necessary to reduce, to be able to press forward with all the wrong attributes, agents, and support systems, and to realize that this was made this way on purpose. That religion is masterfully put together because it gives the verisimilitude, the appearance of something that postulates as logic and fairness, right? We automatically jump from logic to fairness, and the noumenon, or the noumena, when you talk about Kant, and the actual experience, the quality of the experience, the richness of the experience, my experience, the qualia of the experience, and the fact that we have to unitize this because we don't own it. And then you have to search for who does own it. And you realize, of course I own it. So what's happening here is, it becomes obvious, is that there is I use the term franchising far too much, but that is the term. But it really is in totality, from what we see here, it is a production factory, a corporatization, where it is not this masterful sort of galactic and interdimensional energy production factory that works through multifarious, multifaceted hydra heads or states. But it is it is under the assumption, and this is why fairness is pushed and peddled, and yet we don't experience it or see it. The only time you'll get ahead is when you're selling out people closest to you, from selling them Amway products to having the energy around you manipulated, because there is not available principal resources. When you look at all of the items that are necessary for, you can jump from Maslow to Plutchkin, right? And you can look at these renditions and these variations of, when you talk about quality and you talk about qualia, when you talk about quality, when you talk about a noumenon, when you see this from a doxastic point of view, it's not complex. In fact, the complex thinkers that believed that the universe was construct, von Neumann, when you look at these super geniuses that were irrefutably genius, Why? What sets them apart? So the plebeian, we're going to say, right, is going to see things through the eyes they're allowed to see them through, that they're given, to the resources that they're given, to the structural components and the construct of life, um, the welt to the velt, right, the world around them, um, and what is not aphorism, right? There are aphorisms that are hanging around us all the time, epithets and aphorisms, like Nietzsche alludes to, right? Um, Never has there been a timeless echo like the words of Nietzsche. And Jordan Peterson gets into this a lot over the years, where he's looking at Carl Jung and a very freaky, scary aspect to what he was looking at. You know, when you have these golden nuggets of philosophical truth, the big question that looms and hangs there, that might as well be jet streams coming down from the upper atmosphere, or at least hung there in the sky above us, is what are you going to do with it? You know, how is this going to affect you? How are you going to work with the puzzle pieces that we gave you? And the truth is that it is a big ruse. And when people in mass begin to realize this, it results in what it was designed to do, is to topple over. That, no, you think you chose the government. No, you're given the idea of choice. No, you're arguing while you're trapped inside an electromagnetic belt system that you can't travel beyond, and that you are essentially effed, right? I'll say it. It's my channel. You're fucked. And then there are practitioners, or those who think they're practitioners, working in the liminal zone. We only call it liminal, but this is the liminal right here. The liminal production factory. I used to call it the Jewish Plato machine, right? It could be the Khazarian Plato machine. It could be the Pharisee Plato machine. It could be the Elohim Jewish Plato machine. But to come up with something so tricky and then to go, well, we're just going to use anti-principle. We're going to use the principles that these, the structural components of what the spirit does to the body, even though the body is booby-trapped galore, right? And these subversions and mutations occur. When I talk about Dr. Michael Levin, the research is just so fascinating that, you know, you'd like to be there peering over his shoulder and to see him subsidized in such a way where he's got groups of top-minded scientists. But that's the whole point here, is what made these people, what chose these people, and this is not in a jealous way. This is that they don't have freedom. The very people that work as these top-level scientists, they don't have freedom. They don't even have agency. They think they have agency. They think they've reached this this place where they have free will above everyone else because they've somehow been graced with it or earned it. No, they are working within a limited scope, within a limited field, where they can only think and access through the polarity of the electromagnetic field to incite a definite outcome. That it's saying, look, you're going to build my machine ultimately, whether you like it or not. So the the negative side of this, if you can just get into positives and negatives and even esteem that negative is something that's beyond good and evil, as with begrudgingly I say the pentagram and why we see things as evil is the unknown that we're and yeah, I don't even feel good about saying that because I know I've been exposed to, privy to that inverted pentagram power. And when you talk about it, it's like, oh, I'm going the other direction. You're going to wish that you learned to work with the energies that I talk about. And do I have encouragement? Do I have people beyond a fascinating trail off? Even though this is it's like I'm giving you the beginning manuals and we're learning together, but that's not what exists here. That's the whole point here. Is that ultimately, whatever humanity is, it is not a collective. It's taking bits and pieces of scattered remnants of races potentially, placing that energy within a recognizable form that is not too far off, even though you got 1,400-pound people walking the earth, even though you have 65-pound people walking the earth, even though you have people who worship and set their days disciplined around a mantra, only eating certain foods and meditating all day, and then you have others that live in total toxic disgust, and so you're and they eat low quality foods, and the highlight of their life is to get enough money given to them, take a Lyft or an Uber ride to Walmart, and hop aboard that like complain that whatever device they're riding along in Walmart, that it's going to support their 1,400-pound body. And in that mental mind operation, as a consensus, there is a middle area. There is a very skewed Vitruvian man, to use that moniker as, for lack of a better. I saw on a philosophy channel where I saw it. I think I did see it on YouTube somewhere, but it was comparing Nietzsche to Dostoevsky. And when you do this, ultimately, you have to, the best thing to do is to start at the top and backward engineer from Ubermensch to the underground man, because this is the same. These are, you could say, two halves of a coin, but it's really the same person, the same persona, and how that it's a critique on humanity to say, look, you see this individual who is an individual who has gained their individuality through process. They have had to filter through the most complex forms of rejection, where they've been rejected by the field itself, because the field recognizes it as not necessarily a direct threat, but an independently running and potential superior machine that would put the entire efforts out, because the machine itself, as complex as it seems, runs on its own first principle directive, which is to cause problems, which is to cause incendiary chaos, and that makes it fuel, right? So when you get into the conceptualization of Zarathustra, the Zoroaster, when you further that and you're looking at a Messiah figure, the Zoroaster being the front runner or the forerunner in Persia to Jesus Christ, some would say, as the figurehead, And it is better to conceptualize these things. In fact, you're supposed to conceptualize them. But what happened is there was an exposure that Madame Blavatsky might best describe, and then David Icke kind of filtering this idea where you have these rays, right? You have from the Enlightenment era way back that never ended to the times now, and the chain or the, the sequence that is of code that is being projected toward a deterministic future. Like, don't you see that the future and time travel shouldn't be possible because free will is rampant, and anything could happen. And the more creative that you are, the less likely it is that you would ever know that a computer or an AI system, no matter how advanced, wouldn't know what your next move would be, and you wouldn't even move at all. You would stay in a meditative transient state, knowing that the human body, that the isolated carbon-based prison that we're put in, and it is a prison. Like, ultimately, when you come down to it, you'll flip-flop over and over again. Is it a prison? Right. So, are these belt systems, and these spheres, and it's like right out there in the open. You have your ganglionic mass behind your solar plexus. You have your vagus nerve. You have the pons. You have the olfactory. There is a mini brain system going on here. How can you say that something is mini or small? Like the concept of homunculus. That wasn't a dumb idea. It was basically taking a form and saying, maybe this is the form that should be taking place, right? But then you get into these trails of eugenics, and there's a superiority or a supremacy with mind where we think, oh, modernity, we've advanced. Everything is basically put under the shadow of our huge, lofty intellectualism. And what is it? The Institute of it's a mind institute, right? And I heard this being talked about the other day, where it's like you can take a Copernican or Galilean or Euclidean conceptualization of how a lot of, and then get into things that are more, I would say, true piety rather than theology. When you look at David Hume, right? When you're looking at Kant, when you're looking at Spinoza, when you look at the direct links with Thomas Aquinas on into Francis of Assisi, and that you have a working model here, right, that was going off into what would be considered pseudoscience, because that was the science of breaking beyond, right, breaking beyond the occult and spiritualism, to not find machina, right, to not find self-replicating races, to not have that as the endpoint, to say all of these variables exist, and many, many more, much more. And you are, in fact, like, it's so hokey and tacky when people refer to this. Oh, you are creator. You are God. You are. It's like, no, you're not. And you're proving that every single day. Because you don't do what a God would do, which is amassing your power. What would a God do if it was isolated? If a God was isolated, suppressed, basically put on a back burner as an experiment. If that God truly was a God, right? And this is some scary territory. Then they would amass. That God would amass as much energy as possible, go beyond available resources, and build up the truth in them through principle, because there is no stopping. There is no stopping like to like, right? There is no stopping the amassment, the organization, the quality building, the qualia. no matter how much illusion or and it's beyond physical constraints, right? Because when you start to work with electromagnetics, you're talking about something that's very much there, and it's very much not noticed through the refraction of protein structures when we talk about optics, right? And then you have to get back into how you would approach everything, which is the engineering and the manufacturing does not allow for what would be termed as second sight or a second vision, that you're not able to see what's really there. You're not able to have that. You have an ultraviolet and a infrared light spectrum awareness, where you could call it intuition, but it shouldn't be segmented into a lesser role. That should be in operation all the time, right? So you get into defining what the liminal is. And as I say, this is the liminal. This is a middle ground. You are neither living and you are neither dead. You are held in a form of stasis. How could you have the perception that you are not changing, morphing, and growing all the time? A child is put at ease with this so-called Godhead placed within it, within the unit, the structural unit of a human body, because they are in growth, because they are given a trickle down mechanism of growth hormone and available generational capacity, but that ends. And so how can you place an upper shelf and say this ends? And you're using time as a structural limiting factor. Like time is used not as a tool, not as a glorified device or mechanism to break beyond and then to realize that I can segment time in bubbles, and I can use those segmented, like you have all these experiments going on in petri dishes all over, but you have these spherical bodies that are cultivating and culminating into a networking system, right? And when we really look at communication, nothing's being communicated. The entire complex effort exhausts itself. That's what the whole system is meant to do. You're meant to walk away with devoid of meaning, exhausted, not having any sort of answer. And the answer is growth. It's to amass as much energy as possible, knowing through, I don't want to use the term intuition or intuit or intuitive process, right? But it is a knowing that hints more at an a priori, right? Where there is a future projection that's there from the wealth, the past of a world that, though it's been heavily suppressed, it does exist, and it is your world. It is my world. It has to be localized, and that any conditional phenomenon that would be studied, whether under a microscope or with certain equipment, where does the information go? The scientist is given grant money. The scientist needs grant money to buy food and to pay for their housing, much like a student obviously needs a lot more money than a student loan would offer. So you are automatically being heavily limited because you are not chosen, right? And the only ones that are chosen are those who aren't going to ascend beyond a certain point. They're the conformists, the sellouts, or the really the minions that I point out. And years ago, I started writing about concepts, and it's like, how crazy do you think that is now? That you would have these, what I termed as a general heading, four spots. There is a hyper version of this, there are other divisions of it that are based on false presuppositions, right? That you are supposed to believe that a woman, stands for these certain things, and it's like, no, that's just a physical construct that you were placed within, that you refracted back onto yourself and morphologically became that through eras of repeat, and then an entire system was set out. A foretold system was set out because they designed the construction of the human female body, the morphization that occurred with that, and then the generational aspects of modifications. And ultimately, it was to produce a product that you are now, that you think that you are living within this sort of coterie or coven, and that there's a supremacy and a hierarchy. But when war, in the throngs of war, when shit goes into complete and total chaos, and people are using the bones of their neighbors as weapons against other people, you see the truth. You see the Schadenfreude. You see the dark hue, the animus, right? And even to allow the interchangeable term, like, there's a very stark and big difference between anima and animus, right? Because it is not a duality, it is not a polarity, and that's what they want you to think, right? When you get into the disclosure and the hints that are put forth regarding Rosicrucianism, you see that there is no sex there at all. So it's a mechanism to get you battling in another area, so that they can keep excreting hormones that are going to invariably keep the production and the morphization, the so-called evolution. It's a devolution, de-evolution, because what you're looking at is you're looking at something that was constructed and engineered and allows you certain room, right, to think that you are in fact getting somewhere with it when you're compartmentalizing and isolating. And the moment you don't go along with it, like Nikolai Tesla, right, they'll take all your work and kill you off, as a ruined, lonely old man, right? And they'll even plant certain ideas and construct other people. And it's like, so what's the point of this? Like, to lay out such an abstract rendition or version of this world that is obviously a prison. It's obviously being used against the individual. And it's like, well, that's the whole point. You reduce everything down into its primary, right? Into its rudimentary principle fact, into a statement, and you say, yes, the individual. So you're stuck somewhere between hating everybody but being part of a so-called governmentally controlled system, kakistocracy, if you want to call it that, and supposing yourself as an individual that has no real choice, right? So you're liminally stuck somewhere that you don't even accept. The acceptance aspect doesn't even have to take place. That you just are hung here because you are not asserting your power, because you now believe in the construct of who your family is, who people in society are, who your mentors are, who this person is, and you start to regard very minimalistic notions, right? Where we're going to call this person a genius. We're going to say that this group of people is stupid. We're going to say that this attribute within the human condition is highlighted as being exceptional. And it's like, so what proof do you have? where did that take us? Well, where we are now. And it's like, you think that where we are now is anything positive when we use that term positive and negative as it's better, it's good, it's preferred. Like, you can't even get down to the fact that altruism or things that are beneficent, what the greater good is. Is it to serve humanity? You know that these people are despicable. You know that they think and work and operate ultimately like demons, right? Where they disrupt the thoughts, the continuity, the flow of truth and true information, or a true matriculation that spreads out to everyone. You know that this conceptualization is just something that you hide behind that doesn't exist, you know? And of course, I've got illegals pounding outside, trying to create this demonic incendiary entropy, right? And that's the whole point, is that you've got these people who are entropy producing agent provocateurs, Manchurian candidates, right? So, and even if I use that term illegals like 10 years ago, you would have automatically presupposed who I'm referring to. All right, what, and now that can be a subset, a subclass of 15 different cultural races from around the world that are both infiltrating, disrespecting a certain constitutional aspect of what America is, because even that's obscure. Do you see that you can't come down to any fundamental principle truth? There's us and there's them. And then when you further delineate that, there's me and there's you. And when you look at a direct linear alignment with, are we two bodies doing similar actions, quid pro quo, or working together, right? So you see what government is. It's an acquisition, and then a meritocracy is based from that, right? And then capitalistic measures and means. And it's like, well, you squandered it away. And it's like, well, no, you created this faction that was going to subvert and sabotage my efforts. And that's not cool. And now we're at war. And then you see, there's not a lot of people around, and there's a rally behind you, and people are pissed off that their farmland is now worthless, or that there was a direct overt theft of certain materials and resources, and now you are at war, and there's all this space here, and it's like, no, we're taking over these territories, or we're shoving these people out into this territory, and that's never really been investigated or known. And now you have these countries that are setting up factions and borders, and it's like, do you realize that that's a premise that's based on an illusion that is errored thinking, and it's because you were only given that, and you think that you chose that as an avenue, but you were going through this sort of matrix, mind matrix, that ultimately is makes a statement in totality of an expression that this is what I am, this is who I am. So at the end of the day, it's not even Buddhism points you in the right direction. The most articulate masters in this field will make you feel good in the immediate. They will take you back to the breath, and they will take you back to the rudimentary, the basics. But you really are at war. You really are under attack. And their answer is kind of like, well, nothing, it's not a nihilistic effort, just nothing really exists, right? So, and it's like, you want to go into that non-existence, and then you start to feel great because you're neither in a negative or positive state. You're only in the breath, right? And you can learn to access this anytime. I remember years ago when I realized that I can go into this meditation anytime. I spent a great deal of time trying to study that and master that in my early 20s. And what happens is you become a direct threat to the system outside of you, and you're given no boons. In fact, all the people around you are given all the resources because there's nothing dangerous about them. They live in their own little fart chamber or their echo chamber. They think that they are powerful, and yet they are not a threat to anything outside of them. They're 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 literally confined into becoming what's the scariest thing is the devil, that the human form that they assume themselves to be, that they're going to adamantly stay in, and then they can be under the direct influence of power and control, because now a veil can be um, super imposed around them, right? An electromagnetic prison can further reduce them into being chastised, being granted, having certain offerings taken away off the table, and now there's a direct routing that can take place of, you are a minion, you will do what I say. There's just this reduction and reduction into the supposed self, as the self just dies away, thinking that life really equals nothing, and that I need to believe in something, so I'll choose this religion, right? When I say this religion 2.0 or this religion light, the light version, right? Not the light shining, the light version, the easy hackable version, right? So obviously there's not a threat in who is hacking into these systems and into this central system, that there is only one operating power, if you will, one operating mind that pays homage to the long running lineage of when this was first constructed, right? And then you have these people that are circling Mecca. You have these people that call themselves Masons. You have these people that are Catholic, and they all have this encrypted, occulted tier system that leads back to a central system that is the same system over and over again. And it is like it's a wing or an arm that Rudolf Steiner saw and could only use these terms at the time, where you have Lucifer, you have Ahriman, you even have Baphomet and these other characters that emerge as energy systems and are even given sigils and identities that, and then, yeah, of course, you have Moloch and Baal and all these other gods and religions, Mithraism, monism, all these different isms, right? Isms, schisms, games, that at the root, at the heart, do the same exact thing in operation over and over again, right? They only seem to differ because they're batches. They are batches that can be further categorized, stored and placed away, and are they seem random, and they seem like they're under that, like they're they're unqualified, they're unfinished, and that they lead to unfinished arbitrary efforts. But that's only from the existential. The the reason they seem unfinished is because they are an aspect of a totality of an operating system that manifested this as a mere part, right? A cog in the machine. The religion is broken because the religion isn't complete, wasn't an effort to be complete, and you were meant to believe in this so much because the living flesh, the living component, is an extremely important aspect to it. And if you wouldn't have done it, somebody else would. But you are the one who is like, you're the chosen one. You're the chosen one to be a flank, to be an aspect of the machine, a small, minute part of the process, to where the best description these days that people could use is when you see these drones that are made into, I saw one that was made into King Kong, and it was very convincing, climbing up a building. And then when you get closer, you realize that your eye is being tricked, and that you're just looking at sort of a mercurial nebulous conceptualization of really a fragmentation of a pixelization that could be put into more complex, uniform postulates, right? But what really hints at these, what I talked about years ago, is these nano machines that are able to work as closely knit as our cells do, and to take on any form and to even morph into different forms, right? So you get into things that Joe Shabak is talking about as far as software, that we are reducible into software, that we are on running software, right? That the self is transferable, reproducible, and even in our efforts to be more, that was most likely something that was allowed to be, because you could be turned off any moment, any second. You know, the the, the mission would be aborted, right? So you get into the true Messiah of a modern, you could say modern religion, emergent religion, where you look at Keanu Reeves playing Neo in the Matrix, the original Matrix. And yes, every terrible movie after that is part of this, right? It's like if you go on from something that's so perfect and so eloquent in its statement, that um, you have someone who was able through mentalism to break free from the machine. And if you just keep watching it, you'll see each movie get worse and worse, quite purposefully, because once you get free, you're always living under the shade, under the shadow of what you left, which there's nothing outside of it, right? So, like, what's going to support you? You've toppled over the false construct, at least for yourself. You've broken free from the false construct. Don't you see that every effort was placed into creating this Masonic jungle? Now that you are outside of it and you think you gained freedom, you are, what are you, a spirit form sitting on some desolate planet that they destroyed, um, sitting there confused, now having to feed off whatever resources are available to you, probably like a pure light or electromagnetics. And now you're having to recreate what? The same thing? Because what you'll run into is you'll run into these minds, um, you'll run into these brains, right? That are presupposing themselves, and they may not be aware of or culminating the same power as you, but they damn well want to take what you have and they want to acquisition it. So you get into this unfortunate outcome that we're forced to see and deal with every day. And this is why you are put at ease. This is why you are given the false fabricated construct of a society that can uniformly get along. No, you're not getting along. Your mother and your sister are witches, and they're planning and plotting things, and they're directly having communication with an organization that assumes themselves as a coterie because they are in that form, because ultimately that is what they worship, ultimately what they have chosen throughout lifetimes, you could say. You have these men who are very fragile, who will use violence and authoritarianism, and now that has turned into what? Using feminine methodology through running their mouths and trying to argue people into exhaustion and submission. But then they realized that the females were offering something that wasn't really an offer. It was the spider finally feeding, extracting the succubus, the energy, and then realizing that now that I have this energy, I don't even need the primary donor, right? Which wasn't a donor at all. There was no submission. There was just, that's all there is. There's this so-called aspect of this the pig wearing lipstick, Yeah, it is a very Schopenhauer outlook. And Schopenhauer, a lot of these philosophers, if they only had the daunting realization of what all this would manifest into, it's particularly Nietzsche, you would see that they aren't excited about it at all, right? That they saw this bleak future and that it was much darker than they could have ever imagined, because there wouldn't be any romanticism left, right? Any more there wouldn't be happy, jolly people that are misled and believing in the blue pill, to the extent where they're just living these amazing, lavish lives. You see that those are the most demented. Donald Trump, Exhibit A. Warren Buffett, if you want to get into it, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos. When I say and pose the question to anyone that is rationally balanced or sane on any level, if you could say that any of us are, if I say, well, would you want to be one of these people? Oh, God, no. It's kind of like, well, that's the whole point, is that they're capped, and they accept it every day. Every day they have a choice to get up and to say, I'm giving all this shit up. I have to be myself. And then instantly you would begin to see the understanding that I can amass energy and power, but I have to give it up in the corporeal or the carnal completely. Nobody would listen to him or respect him. They would say, "Oh, now I see the true currency. It is these energetics. It's the energy itself that will promote and separate me and promote eternal life." And when you go to the true well, the wellspring, it is unlimited, but there is a definite choice there. So you have people who act like they have one foot in one side, they're dipping their toe in the water, and it's like, no, they're like the underwater paddlers in the Silicon Valley. They are desperately trying to use. They're going to the altars and producing and trying to reproduce rituals. They're reading manuals all day and breaking it down into esoteric components. They're pretending at board meetings that they're working uniformly as they're doing mental mind meditations to extract the energy out of other people. They're using language to manipulate through neuro-linguistic programming. They're putting everything they have, right? And it's like, that's what it wants you to do. It wants you to think that you are actually getting somewhere. And the outcome is extremely bleak.